You are listening to Bound by Death Sorcerer, written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 19, The Bat Swarm. Grumbling, Tyler swung his mace into yet another swarm of bats. The majority of the monsters shattered, their souls immediately adding to Tyler's spiritual reservoir, but two managed to make it out just barely singed. A moment later, a glowing blue disc knocked one out of the air. As it rebounded, the luminous projectile began to fade, but not before colliding with the other monster, killing it instantly. As the two boys continued forward, stepping over the scattered corpses, Tyler whistled. "Nice shot." He glanced over to his companion. Kenny was looking even worse, he was practically stumbling forward rather than walking. "Thanks," he wheezed. "I couldn't aim like that without my receptor though." Tyler took a moment to scan his companion head to toe. While Kenny was clearly not much more prepared for delving than Tyler was, he at least had boots, a utility belt, a small backpack, and an oiled leather vest. Much better than Tyler's own sorry apparel. Tyler's gaze lingered for a moment on the boy's tight, fingerless gloves. Snapping his eyes away, Tyler assessed the progress of the fire. It didn't look too good, it seemed to be circling around in the same direction they were. They would just have to hope that they could outrun it and that by the time they made a full circuit, the fire would have burned itself out in those areas. "It's the gloves, isn't it?" Kenny nodded.
Yeah.
"I have a ranger class, they let me conjure ammunition for ranged weapons, increase the power of my projectiles, and also help increase my dexterity." Tyler frowned. "So why are you fighting unarmed? I mean, you have those little discs, but it didn't seem like they were doing much to that spider." He paused. "But you clearly did some serious damage before then." Kenny didn't respond for a moment, and Tyler assumed he was thinking over his answer, until he realized that the other boy was just trying to regain his breath. Glancing back towards the distant inferno, Tyler paused. "We're not gonna make it if you can't keep up this pace." Kenny heaved a shuddering sigh. "I know." He coughed. "If I can't keep up, just leave me, okay?" Tyler shook his head. "No. We're in a dungeon, right?" Leaning against the nearest mushroom stalk, Kenny shut his eyes, taking deep breaths. Finally, he replied in a hoarse whisper. "So what? I'm guessing most of your exhaustion is from overusing spells."
Yeah.
Kenny paused. "Where are you going with this?" Tyler grinned. "It's not a normal fatigue then, it's a magical one. You just need to recover arcane energy." Opening his eyes, Kenny met Tyler's gaze skeptically. "Okay, sure. But we don't exactly have time for that. At least with the techniques I have, raising the arcana would take just as long, if not longer, than just taking a rest." He paused. "Which brings us right back to the same problem." Tyler's grin grew wider. "Ah, but we're in a dungeon, aren't we? We can form a party." Kenny blinked. "Oh. Right." He paused again, though he was clearly growing far more optimistic. "You have enough to share?" Tyler shrugged. "Only one way to find out." Tapping his foot, he glanced back to the approaching flames. "Okay, so how do we do this?" Cupping his hands to his mouth, he shouted as loud as he could. "Hey, Dungeon Core. We wanna form a party. Can you help us out with that or something?" Coughing, Tyler cleared his throat again. Sparing a glance back to Kenny, he saw that the other boy was looking at him dumbfounded, as if he were a complete madman. "You have been invited to join a party. Members, Tyler, not joined, Kenny, not joined." Kenny blinked, and Tyler grinned. "Sometimes, you just had to ask loudly when you needed help." "I accept," the two boys said in unison. You have joined a party with Kenny. Nodding, Tyler glanced back once more to the raging inferno drawing ever closer. We still have at least a couple of minutes. All right, so. I'm not sure how to do this. Tell me if you feel something, okay? Kenny tiredly nodded, and Tyler called upon the well within his spirit. Pulling it up into his body, Tyler allowed a small trickle to circulate within his own body, and then he pushed it outwards towards Kenny. The energy resisted, not seeming to want to breach his skin, but then, it found a hole. There was a place where it could flow through a sort of tunnel that stretched out in a direction from his spirit that somehow didn't seem to correspond to any physical direction in space. It was an odd sensation indeed, so it wasn't very difficult to Receptor and hone in on channeling it. Kenny perked up. I feel a little. He nodded slowly.
Yeah.
I'm definitely getting a small trickle from you. How much are you putting in? Satisfied that it was working, Tyler didn't answer. Instead, he separated about a fifth of his reservoir from the remainder, pulling it up and then squeezing it through the link all at once. Tyler cut off the flow, and Kenny staggered. Rising to his feet with clearly renewed vigor, the other boy stared at Tyler with his mouth agape. What in creation? Satisfied, Tyler turned away from the approaching fire. He could feel the heat again, as gusts of air sporadically blew outwards. Come on, let's go. Sparing just a single glance back at Kenny to make sure that his companion was following, Tyler hurried out into the darkness with greatly increased haste. They had lost quite a bit of ground, and he was determined to not only recover it, but to gain even more distance than they had originally. Catching up to Tyler, Kenny joined him at his side. How much arcane energy do you have? Receptoring on the path ahead, Tyler considered how to answer. I gave you half, he lied. He didn't want the other boy to expect that he could always depend on Tyler for fueling his spells. Even though Tyler had been consuming every soul he harvested since rescuing Kenny, he was sitting at a net loss since he entered the area. He really couldn't become dependent on always having plenty of arcane energy available, and he couldn't let anyone else become dependent on him for it either. Damn. Kenny remained silent for a few more moments, and Tyler kept his eyes on Scarlet and the path she illuminated up ahead. You must have been super prepared, Kenny continued. How many delves have you done? This is my first. Fudging hell. Tyler suppressed a groan. He really didn't want people thinking he was more capable than he was, especially not in such a life or death situation as this. Approximately an hour later, the two boys collapsed beside the hulking spider corpse. The fire was still raging elsewhere, but fortunately, Tyler's plan had worked. The fire was so big that the origin point had burned itself out by the time they made a full circuit. The corpse made a good landmark in the rocky, ashen wasteland that they now found themselves in. The carapace was now blackened and charred, but Tyler idly observed that the inside was mostly intact. Coughing, he reached for his water skin. The heat and the ash had sorely parched his throat, and the few sips of water he allowed himself did wonders for relieving his exhaustion. With a tired look, he held it out towards Kenny. Sitting up, the other boy took it gratefully. Just a couple sips, Tyler warned him. Kenny nodded as he unscrewed the cap. After taking his own fill and handing the water skin back, he wiped his hands on his oiled vest, accomplishing little more than smearing the dirt, sweat, and ash around. So. The ranger pursed his lips. What are you doing here? I mean, obviously you've made your class work for you, but still, he paused, gathering his thoughts. Tyler shrugged, speaking before Kenny could continue. I'm kind of on the run. I needed a place to hide, and now that I have a receptor, I also have a way to get stronger. He sighed.
Yeah.
I know. When people like me try to delve, they don't last long. But I really didn't have much choice. Definitely not if he wanted to save the others. Did you steal it? Tyler's gaze snapped back to the present, landing on Kenny's inquisitive expression. Your receptor, I mean. And that's why you're on the run? Sighing, Tyler crossed his legs.
Yeah.
Something like that. He paused, shaking his head to himself. What about you? Sure, you've got a combat class at least, but you can't tell me you're supposed to be here either. Kenny chuckled. Same deal, pretty much. Raising an eyebrow, Tyler smirked. Who did you steal it from? Kenny sighed as well, while reclining to rest on his back with his knees up. Well, technically, I'm not the one who actually stole it. Tyler perked up. I hear a story here. Rolling his eyes, Kenny continued. It's really not all that interesting. He paused. So for a little background, my dad is a super successful chef. I mean, as far as chefs go. Even has an uncommon class for it. Anyway, he manages a lot of different restaurants and catering services, including at La Isla Bonita. Is that how you got your job as a valet? Tyler interrupted.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, he also runs a free kitchen for the homeless, or just people who don't have much. Tyler perked up. Wait, is it the one by the dockyard in the industrial district?
Yeah.
He tried to set it up in a more convenient location, nearer the residential district, for instance, but the city planners wouldn't let him. Kenny laughed darkly. They presented all these old regulations about business codes, but my dad said they just didn't want homeless people convening in any vaguely public space. Tyler rolled his eyes. He's 100% right. Honestly, what always bugged me the most is how they can't just openly say it. He grinned. Also, your dad's soup is total ass. Hey! Kenny sat up indignantly. That's on purpose, actually. He could only supply so much at once, but he can't stand to refuse to serve people, so he came up with that as a way of making sure people only drank what they needed to survive. Rolling his eyes again, Tyler scoffed. Well, that's one way to do it. Anyway, Kenny continued, as I was saying, my dad likes to help people. He'll even let people stay at one of our houses. He actually got in legal trouble once for allowing some criminals to hide out there. But he never, Kenny scrunched up his face. He helps people.
Yeah.
But he doesn't stand up for anything. Like when the bureaucrats told him he needed to move the shelter, he just did it. He didn't take them to court or anything, even though there was another restaurant right across the street. When my mother cheated on him, he didn't do anything. I was the one who had to bring it out into the open. And then he let her walk away with half our estate. Didn't put up a fight at all. Tyler continued to listen in silence as Kenny continued. I love him. But, and I know this sounds terrible, I don't really respect him anymore. The young man sighed, running a hand through his sandy blonde hair. He wanted me to work my way up in the casino. Become a manager. Even get close to Lord Harley. Tyler stilled, but Kenny didn't seem to notice. I always wanted to be a delver. My dad could pay for it. I'm already a student at the Imperial Academy, but he says he can't lose me. Apparently, he's been saving up a fund to buy me a receptor, one that he says will guarantee me a good life as a businessman or civil servant. The boy shook his head. I can't throw my life away like that. Sparing a glance over to Tyler, he looked almost embarrassed. If you've been to my dad's kitchen shelter, he gestured awkwardly. I guess what I'm saying must seem pretty fudging ridiculous, and I wouldn't blame you if you resent me. He sighed. But it's not what I want, and I can't change myself. Sitting up, Tyler fixed him with a stony gaze. I don't give a shit. Kenny blinked, flinching backwards. I don't give a shit about your background or the fact that you want to throw it away. Tyler shook his head. For most of my life, the vast majority of people treated me like crap, if they even noticed me at all. But that's just how people are. I want the best for them anyway. Tyler paused. Besides, how does you throwing away your privilege change anything for me? Like I said, I don't give a shit. That's your choice, why should I judge you for it? Shaking his head again, Tyler pursed his lips. Look, you're here now, and that's what I care about. Tyler frowned. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best way to put it. I am interested in hearing this, and I think you should continue. Kenny nodded shakily. Thanks. He furrowed his brow. So anyway, I had been saving up on my own, and I found someone selling these gloves. Tyler grinned. Aha. Let me guess, you bought them, and then it turned out they were stolen. The blonde boy's shoulders slumped.
Yeah.
From the Empire's personal treasury. Tyler blinked. By creation, you are totally fudged. Kenny snorted. Thanks. After a moment of silence, he tilted his head. What about you? Who did you steal yours from? Tyler opened his mouth, only for Kenny to light up, interrupting with sudden excitement. Wait, no, don't tell me. You stole it from La Isla Bonita, didn't you? Tyler nodded, and Kenny shook his head in wonder. How in all creation did you pull that one off? He chuckled.
Yeah.
You're totally fudged too. Thanks. The two boys shared a glance, and then Tyler glanced away, his eyes landing on the steaming spider corpse. Did you start your delve unarmed? Kenny shook his head. No. I had a bow, and all kinds of alchemical throwing weapons. He rolled his eyes. Those ran out, of course, and I kind of. He looked away. Some foul, goopy black tentacle thing managed to snag my bow. Probably an ichor dripper. Tyler looked back to the spider. If we're going to continue, I think we'll need to get you a proper weapon. Kenny frowned. How? Picking up the spider leg, he had stubbornly clung onto it for the whole journey. Tyler grinned. He was hoping that the corpse still had some silk left in it. We make one.
Akumah Audiobooks.